Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Oner podcast, the podcast where we break down and review films and sometimes TV shows all in one big, long, unbroken take. I'm Austin Archer, and with me as always is my childhood next door neighbor and lifelong best friend,
Cramer, England.
and we were adolescents together. We were adolescent young men, and we went through adolescence together.
Yes. Luckily, we didn't murder anyone.
That you know of. You
And
don't
that you know of, yes.
that either one of us is aware of.
Yeah.
So we're still in the realm of TV. Last week we talked about Andor season 1, and we've been getting a lot of comments asking us to talk about Adolescence from Netflix.
Yeah.
Because our show is called The Oner. And the big thing about this show is it's 4 episodes that are about an hour long apiece, and they're all true, unbroken
Yes.
oners.
Yep.
There's a lot of sort of debate. I think we're a little bit late to this. This was kind of something people were talking about maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, but I don't think, I think that it's still relevant. But a
Yeah.
lot of the talk about this show seems to be around. There is definitely really potent subject matter from this show to be
Yeah.
discussed, but a lot of the discussion seems to be centered around this convention of doing oners for every episode. And
Yeah.
does it work or not? Does it serve the story, or is it just a gimmick? Because that's kind of the question anytime this convention is used, is like, sure, it's technically impressive and it's interesting to look at and it's interesting to think about how they executed that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
is there a reason for it to exist
Yeah.
in this story? Just on the outside, on the surface, because obviously, just like with Andor, we're not going to be able to get through every single story beat
No.
of this show.
No.
But how did you feel about this convention, the technical convention of every episode being a oner?
Yeah, I think oners are great. They're always fun to see because of the skill that has to go into them, right?
Mm.
And if you don't know it's coming, it's kind of fun sometimes to be like, oh, that it hasn't cut yet, to see those things. This is it's funny. We've been talking. So we've done Presence, we've done Here,
Mhm.
which both of those are kind of one takes. There are many sections that have one take. It's many oners together.
Yeah.
And we both felt like Here wasn't really it didn't really execute very well on that, but Presence did really, really well. And this is also another instance where it's kind of in that same ballpark, I feel like,
Mhm.
because it's much more of a play.
Yeah.
And I felt like it worked really, really well for this show,
Yeah.
because they're not trying to make it a murder mystery. They're
Right.
not trying to make it, they're trying to get you into the emotion of what is happening in that moment for each situation.
Yeah.
So the first episode is really like they arrest the kid, they arrest
Mhm.
him, and it's like his story along with the parents, like trying to just figure out what is going on,
The sort of
right?
whirlwind of waking up in the morning, your kids are getting ready
Yeah.
to go to school, and in come the armed police,
Yeah.
and they're saying, "We're here to arrest your 13-year-old son
Yeah.
for murder," and it's like just the whirlwind of that day of, like,
Yeah.
what that first hour is
Yeah.
like, following the police to the police station, talking to detectives and saying, "Hey, when
Yep.
can we talk to our son?" And waiting for a solicitor, as they call it in the
Yeah.
UK, a
Yep.
lawyer, and having the lawyer kind of break down what's going on. And
Mhm.
we as the audience really do get to see how much can take place in the span of the
Yeah.
first hour of this kind
Yeah.
of,
And I think they kind of I think they might have fudged that a little bit, because it seemed like it was really early in the morning, so nothing was really happening, so they were able to just move through it quickly. I
Mhm.
imagine in this process it takes longer, but I think that's a jump that I was totally willing to take,
Mhm.
because but yeah, so much does happen in that first hour. Like
Yeah, you
just
would think that maybe it would take longer for the lawyer to get there or
yeah.
something that
Yeah.
early in the, who
It
knows?
it's kind of like everything happens so luckily at the right time, but that really didn't bother me,
Yeah.
because it was able to succeed in what it was trying to do. So I was able to make that jump. But yeah, I mean, you focus really, episodes 1 and 2 are kind of the same story.
Yeah.
They're just dealing with this murder that just took place, and kind of the aftermath of what happens. They
Yeah.
arrest him, and then in the second episode they're questioning his friends, and they're trying to make sure that they have enough to charge Jamie, is the kid who did it,
Mhm.
the 13-year-old boy who did it. They're trying to charge him and trying to figure out what they can do, but those two are kind of together. And then 3 and 4 are months after.
Yeah.
I think 3 is 7 months after, or 6 months or something, and then 4 is 13 months after.
Yeah, 3, we kind of catch up with Jamie, who's been in the system now for several
Yeah.
months, and I'm really fascinated by the character of Jamie. I wanna say really quick just about
Yes.
the technical before we move into the story and character.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
just wanna say that for me, the question of whether or not the Oner convention is justified or works, I'm not sure in this series that it feels as necessary or connected to the specific plot as it might in say something like Presence. The reason why it's every
Yeah.
scene is a oneer is because the camera is the perspective of a
Yep.
ghost. And
Yes.
so we are, as that ghost moves through the house, there would be no cuts, and we can only see the story from the perspective
Yeah.
of this
Yeah.
presence. So it sort of necessitates the convention. In a movie like 1917, which is one of my favorite, kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
oneer movies that's stitched together, what I like about that film is the immediacy of this mission that our main
Yeah.
characters are on. That it's like
Yeah.
in the span of, and there's one time jump where one of our main characters is knocked unconscious and he wakes up in the morning, and we do a little bit of a time jump.
Yep.
But outside of that, everything feels fluid, and I like the way that that movie keeps us in the immediacy of the action and doesn't release us from this,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and sort of it kind of like the movie Warfare that we watched, how
Yeah.
warfare is, it's all in real time, and it
Yep.
sort of shows you how much can go down in just a few hours in an active war zone, and how much drama can unfold, and how much
Mhm.
tension it, can build. Um, this story, I think, totally could have been shot in a more conventional way with
Oh, yeah.
coverage and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see anything in here that makes it have to be a oneer, but I also don't mind the oneer. I'm a theater actor
Yeah.
originally. Like, that's where
Yeah.
I started, and that's what, is I kinda cut my teeth on the stage. And what I like about oneers as a convention, and especially in this show, is obviously it's a huge technical achievement for the
Yeah.
camera team,
Mhm.
especially episode 2. Episode 2 is where they flex the most muscle. That's where they're,
Yeah.
like, really
Yeah.
showing off, everything that they can do with this convention. But
Mhm.
passing the camera out the window and then setting it onto a drone and having the drone fly up over the
Mhm.
entire town and then come back down and be put back in the hands of a camera operator. But, uh what I like about this show in particular that really stood out to me is the performances. And
Yes.
whereas in a lot of films, you're going to get performances that are sort of crafted by a director and an editor in
Mhm.
post. In post production, they're going to sort of craft
Yeah.
the beats of an actor's performance. In something like this, everything is as it, it's like the actors are moving in real time, they're responding to each other in real time.
Yep.
And I think that it does something to me as a viewer where I lean forward and I feel like I need to pay attention.
Yeah.
And also, I just like watching actors have to work in real time off of each other and
Yeah.
respond in real time, and knowing that their performance is not going to be manipulated in post by an editor who's gonna, like,
Yeah.
put a reaction shot into a place where they didn't actually do it on
Yeah.
the day. Like, everything is real, and it just feels a little more grounded to me,
Yeah.
and that's probably the thing that works the most about the convention for me, technically, is that this story, like you said, it's not really a mystery, it's quite straightforward,
Yeah.
and I think that this story hits so hard emotionally because of how real it feels. And I think part of what
Yeah.
makes it feel real is the oneer convention.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. The thing about oners, like why does anybody want to use a oner? So
Mhm.
my wife, I was like, okay, I got to watch Adolescence. She's like, well, what's it about? And I said, well, it's these episodes that are all done in one take, and it's about kind of like a murder and a kid, and she's like, well, why did they do that? Like, why are they just trying to flex, or is it, like, is there a purpose? And I was like, that's a really great question, because a lot of oners are just to flex,
Yeah.
but they also serve a very specific purpose. Many of them serve a very specific purpose. Sometimes they're homages. Sometimes they're just kind of, it's just a fun way to kind of like start a movie or whatever. But I feel like one of the biggest reasons you want to do a oner is that you want to build tension.
Hmm.
Now, tension can be something that it can be like absolute tension of like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. I can't, it hasn't cut. Like what's going on, like at the beginning of the Sandra
Gravity.
Bullock movie. Yes, Gravity.
Gravity.
Like
Yeah.
it is really creating that tension. And the best oner, or the oner that always comes to my head is Touch of Evil.
Mm.
Um, which is that you put a guy puts a bomb in the back of a car, and the car is driving throughout the street, and it's like, oh my gosh, when is this bomb going to go off? Like comes up next to a big group of people, and it's like, is it going to go off then? And so like people are talking, and like it's a way to flex, but it's a way to build that tension. And
Yeah.
then you can have all these other moments where you can build tension between characters, and kind of like what you're talking about, right? You can show off your acting ability, and kind of have that tension between the characters. Like, so the second episode was the most technically, as you were talking about, like that was the biggest flex.
Yeah.
But for me, the one that I was most impressed by, out of the three was, or sorry, out of the four, was episode 3.
Mm. Yeah.
That episode just like completely, I don't know, that one blew me away. Like the
Especially
first
from
two.
this young actor
Yeah.
who's just doing incredible work.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah,
like and I was like so surprised by how well he did.
I gotta tell
And
you, British people are just
oh,
always kicking our butts at like
they're
when
amazing.
I just don't know why
Yeah.
UK people are so much more naturally adept at acting that
I
like
don't either.
and they're just stealing all the roles from us. And I mean, I was literally meeting with my friend today who's from the UK about
Yeah.
acting in a movie that I wrote, and I just was like, why are you guys so much better at this than us?
I've asked that too. Why
Yeah.
aren't there so many UK actors so
Yeah.
good?
Hmm.
And this kid is really showing. I mean, I was baffled by him, because I was like, this is an extremely hard thing to do. Like to make sure, you've got like on stage, you've got a stage and you're rehearsing and everything, but you've got a camera that you got to watch out for. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's going up close, and so you can't look into the camera,
And
right? You can't just
this
like,
is his first thing he's ever done.
yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And then the woman who plays in that one, I
She's
was I
fantastic.
was like blown away too.
Yeah.
Like she gives this amazing performance.
Mhm.
And like also the simplicity of them being in a room just talking,
Yeah.
but she brings him a sandwich, right?
Mhm.
And she like you can tell that they've had this history. Like there was so much story that was given in episode 3, that was probably my favorite episode. Now 1 and 2 are awesome because of the technical achievement and like the tension that they're building.
And even to a certain degree 4. Like
And 4, yeah.
there's so much that has to be pulled off in 4
Yeah,
that yeah.
4 kind of mixes all of it, right?
Yeah.
Like you have a
Mhm.
family that has to act together, but they also have to do this choreography that is like that's pretty amazing. And so this story could be told without having a oner.
Yeah.
The reason that I think this story works really well with 4 different oners is that it's not about the surface story.
Mhm.
This whole, these 4 episodes are not about what's happening.
Right.
Like it's all about the emotion of the characters,
Mhm.
what they're going through in the moment.
Yeah.
It's not about the whole thing. It's not about how it affects everybody. It's about how it affects these people.
Yeah, how it affects the community, how
Yes.
it like that drone shot in episode 2 isn't just a flex shot, it's
Yeah.
also a shot about because episode 2 is really about the community.
Yeah.
Episode 2 is about how it's affecting
Yes.
the kids at school,
Yep.
how it's affecting the teachers, how it's
Yeah.
affecting this neighborhood, and that drone shot is sort of showing kind of the it's showing the community and also the tight knit aspect of this. That this is a
Yeah.
small town,
Yes.
and then coming down in on that father.
putting
Who, by
the
the way,
putting
what
the
a
flower.
what a performance from this guy.
This
But
guy is
there
awesome.
are so many incredible performances in
Yes.
the show. I would say, now I like what you said about, like, the reason to use a oner is to build tension. Have
Yeah.
you been watching the show The Studio at all on Apple Plus?
No, I've heard about it. I
It's
want
a
to. I need to.
It's a lot of fun. Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg are doing a ton of oners. The
Nice.
show is just, like, full of oners, but
Mhm.
specifically, there's, I think it's episode 2 maybe of the show. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
called The Oner,
Yeah.
and it's Seth Rogen plays this studio head who's also, like, a big film nerd,
Sure.
and he wants to go to set for a movie that they're making because the final shot of the movie is this big oner, and he
Yeah.
wants to be there for it. He wants to, like, go and watch it, but and the whole
Yeah. Yeah.
episode is a
Yeah.
oner of him kind of constantly messing up their take because and everyone like doesn't want the studio head there. They're like, it makes us all nervous if you're here because everyone like, so like,
Yeah.
but he's
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
promise I'll just be hanging in the background. But then he keeps messing up their shot. Like he's like whispering during one of the shots at one point, and Greta Lee, who's acting in the take, is like, I can hear whispering, you guys. We need to, and then he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so like, and then like, and it's like it's a really frustrating
Yeah.
episode to watch too. But as you said, to build the device being used to build tension because what's happening during the episode is they're
Yeah.
shooting it at magic hour and they have a limited time window to
Yes.
get this
Yes.
shot.
Of
And so
course.
every time the shot messes up, we can actually see in real time the LA sun going down. Like
That is so crazy.
we can see the sky outside
Yeah.
getting darker and darker as the episode
Yeah.
goes and it's just like, "Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh
Yeah.
no." Like and the DP keeps being like, "We've maybe got one chance at like by the time they're like finally at their final chance at the thing he's like we have to go right now but we maybe get one like we have
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's just but so you feel that ticking clock and you can literally see it and it's
Yeah.
cool because the fact that the camera
Yeah.
doesn't cut you're like you're watching the sun go down as the
Yeah.
episode goes on and you're like
Yeah.
oh geez oh no they're
Yeah.
gonna miss
Yeah.
the shot um
Totally.
but
Totally.
I will say I think I think you're right that this
Yeah.
show is
Yeah.
about what's happening to these people.
Right.
Episode 2 or episode 3 is about what's happening to this therapist who has to sort of keep um this veneer of professionalism and this sort of emotional distance up, but we
Yeah.
see that cracking as she's
Yeah.
getting to know
Yeah.
as she's getting to know this really troubled young man
Mhm.
and both kind of having a feeling of loathing him and also feeling a great well of sympathy for him
Yes.
and sadness for him, and juggling that. I will say episode 2 for me, while it's the most technically impressive, I think is the one where plot-wise it loses me a little bit because it
Yeah.
does feel like and I felt this a little bit in episode 1 too, where, like,
Yeah.
I thought they were going to set up a 4 episode I did think it was gonna be a mystery show,
Yeah.
'cause
Yeah.
the what's interesting to me about the character of Jamie is he pretty much consistently denies
Yeah.
having done this crime from the jump. He's telling his parents, "I promise I didn't do it."
Yeah.
And and so you're kind of thinking in conventional terms of what would normally happen in a TV show like this is the
Yeah.
cops are saying, "We know your son committed this crime." He's saying, "I promise I didn't do it." They're saying, "We've got CCTV footage of it." And you're thinking there's probably gonna be a twist where, like, one of his friends dressed up like him or something like that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we're gonna find out later on, or someone was using his phone to send text messages or something like that, because the kid is adamant that he did not do it.
Yeah.
And episode 1 does this rug pull where they just show us the footage, and it's
Yeah.
pretty clear in the footage, like, that's the kid, that's Jamie, and he's committing this murder, like, he's
Yeah.
doing it, and his dad has an amazing performance where he realizes, like, and he just asked him, "You have to promise me, son,
Yeah.
did you do this? And I'm gonna ask you one time," and he says, "No, I didn't." And then he
Yeah.
goes, "Okay, I believe you."
Yeah.
And then they come in and show the dad this footage, and he's just devastated by it. But what's weird is not only is Jamie still denying it when we catch back up with him in episode 3,
Yeah.
but episode 2 also does this weird thing where it continues to feel like they're trying to set up
Yes.
a mystery. Like,
Yeah.
there's a girl at school that they're interviewing, and she seems to be suggesting that Jamie didn't do it and that there was someone
Yeah.
else
Yeah.
involved, and she gets in a fight with a kid, and she accuses that kid of doing it, and
Mhm.
then there's, like, a foot chase with that kid, And it kind of feels like the show is setting up like, "Ooh, there is maybe some kind of other element to this," but it's not. It's
Yeah.
and again, I think maybe what's actually going on is it's just showing it that the show is more realistic. It's more just like
Mhm.
there was a kind of accomplice. This is a friend who gave him the knife,
Right.
and that's why he wanted to, but I think that this episode muddies the waters of the plot a little bit just because it feels like they are trying to do a mystery fake out
Yeah.
one too many times for me in this show, where even in
Mm.
episode 3, when he's still denying it with the therapist, I'm like, it still feels like this show is wanting me to
Yeah.
believe that he did do this, and then they're gonna do a late in the game, another rug pull and be like, But he didn't do it." But that's
Yeah.
not what do you feel that at all when you
Oh,
watch this
yeah.
show? Yeah,
I actually felt the exact same thing,
yeah,
and I think there's a reason for that. So
yeah,
in episode 4, excuse me, I was thinking the same thing, like, well, he says he's not doing it, and, like, you see the footage, but you don't see the murder. They don't have the murder weapon, and so it does kinda make you think, like, well, maybe he didn't. I mean, he's saying he didn't, like, is this really something? And then in episode 4, even in episode 4, which this is 13 months later,
mhm.
there's a guy at the hardware store that's like, "Oh, I don't think your son did it." Like, I don't like, and so, like, they're still doing it. They're
There's
still making
people
it
on
seem
there's
like
people on message boards that are sort of, doing, like,
yeah,
internet sleuthing where they're like, "We think
yeah,
we figured out these other"
yeah,
that there's evidence that the police missed because this is a thing that
yeah.
happens too, is internet detectives like to get on.
Yes. They
Yeah,
wanna solve the murder,
right.
right, and so I think what they're doing again, going back to kind of what I was talking about, like, this is very much about the emotions of the characters in the moments that they're in, and for episode 4, I feel like I learned this principle a long time ago, and I see this a lot in films and TV, whether it's intentional or not. There's 5 stages of grief,
Mhm.
and the 5 stages of grief is a great way to structure a show.
Yeah.
If you look at Groundhog Day, that's
Mhm.
kind of how Groundhog Day is structured. He
Yeah.
starts out with denial, and then
Mhm.
he depression, and then at the end he gets to acceptance, and once he accepts it, that's when he moves on to the day, right? So there's a really great way to structure shows, and I feel like this show is kind of structured or using that same model. And I feel like episode 4 is kind of like in every episode you're kind of denying, like, well, you bargain, like, how did he do, maybe he didn't do it, like, maybe he didn't, and then you get frustrated, like, well,
Episode 3's got some anger for sure.
yes, oh,
Yeah.
totally. And so, like, you have all these emotions, and acceptance is the hardest part, right? And so in episode 4, that's really just the acceptance episode. Like, they go
Mhm.
through all the emotions, but I mean, in the end, it's like they just have to accept the fact because the son, spoilers, which I don't think we said that at the top of the episode, but sorry,
Yeah.
spoilers for the entire show. But
Yeah.
Jamie calls and the whole family's in the car, and he tells his dad, like, I'm gonna change my plea to guilty. And it's kind of like they just have to accept it. Like, you can't really hold on to any hope, like he did it. And so as a viewer, like, it is frustrating. Like, well, what is this? Why are they trying to tell us that, like, maybe he didn't do it? Like, maybe he didn't, right? And we're trying to see all this.
It
And then in the fourth
because it sorta
episode,
just feels like a way to extend the plot so
it
that they can do more things and keep us on the
yeah,
line,
yeah.
which feels a little bit manipulative, but also, I I don't know,
I yeah, no, I totally and I think it's totally valid. I
Yeah.
think it's more telling the viewer that this is a struggle for anybody to accept this, that someone that they knew or they loved or they cared about actually murdered somebody else.
Mhm.
Like that, I mean, I have no idea what that's like, but obviously you're going to go through a lot of emotions in your own head of like, how do I cope with this? And in episode 4, the father's really not completely coped with it until the end. At least that's kind of what it's implying.
Well,
But
it's
like,
also really even interesting how thoroughly a person who's committed an act like this
yeah,
can commit to denial.
yes,
Because when you'd think that if you're Jamie and you're just a young kid, like, and you're just caught and they've got you on camera
yeah,
and and it's like very clearly you. assaulting this girl, whether they've got you stabbing her or not. It's like, hey, we got you, kid.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
that you would just kind of go like, okay, all right. But the fact that he's so willing to, in the face of such strong evidence, commit
Yeah.
to to this denial. And I mean, this is like something that we've seen this before. You see this in true crime documentaries where people will just insist and insist and insist upon their
Yeah.
innocence, even in cases where there's really strong evidence against them. And sometimes these cases remain kind of up in the air and they become the matter of debate amongst public opinion. People who
Yeah.
watch these documentaries have their own fan theories on what happened, and maybe no one will ever know, but it's really interesting how a person can just decide, I'm just going to commit to this narrative
Yeah.
that that unless you can show me the actual footage of me actually doing it, I'm gonna commit to it was someone else. It wasn't
Yeah.
me. It wasn't
Yeah.
me. And I think that I don't, yeah,
Yeah, I think it is an emotion. I think that that could very well have been on purpose, what they were
yeah,
trying to do, right? Again, because it's kind of like this emotional roller coaster is really in real life a really hard thing to cope with for everybody.
mhm,
And the police look at it from the facts, and that is the most, I mean, she was murdered basically right at the time of when they have the footage of him doing it. Like, what are the chances of someone else doing it? And it was with a knife that is anyway. So they're very matter of fact, but the people involved with it, the parents, it's all about emotion, right?
yeah,
And it's so I that didn't. I mean, it bothered me, but I felt like that was on purpose. So it didn't. It bothered me, but I felt like, oh, okay, well, it's contributing to the story, so I think that was intended.
mhm,
But it is kind of like the the second episode for me, though, if I'm going to change gears a little bit,
sure,
the second episode to me was the most straightforward with the theme of the entire show, which what I took away from this show, the theme of the entire show is fathers. This is a show about fathers. The
yeah,
first episode, yeah, the first episode, he gets arrested, but he needs an adult there, and he chooses his father over his mother.
mhm,
And they're talking about it. I mean, and then in the second episode, the story is really the cops, the main
mhm,
cop. It's about him, but it's about him and his son.
yeah.
That is ultimately the story that they're really telling, because his son, it seemed like he might have been on the spectrum. Did you get that with his
For
son?
sure. But
Yeah.
also whether his son's on the spectrum or not, I mean, like, his son's definitely, like, being put in I guess, a special class for
Yes.
kids who are, but also it seems like his son kind of just chooses a life where he's makes himself small and quiet
Yes.
because of the bullying that he receives.
Yes.
But then by the end of the episode, we get a scene with his son where he actually opens up and communicates, and he
Yeah.
sounds quite like
Oh yeah.
he sounds quite, I don't wanna use the word normal, but maybe neurotypical is the better word.
Yes,
Rather
he
than
does seem more
he just
neurotypical. Yeah.
he seems, and it seems like maybe this kid has just chosen to isolate himself, because I would actually say that more so than I think definitely fathers is a big thing, but
Yeah.
I would say that the show, because this is the other thing, like the two big things that people talk about with this show are the technical convention of shooting every episode as a oneer,
Mhm.
and the other big thing is that this is talking about men.
Yeah.
It more so it's like not just fathers, but also
Right.
what's
Right.
going on with young men.
Yeah.
What's happening with young men on the internet? What's happening with, like in America, we have a big problem with violence at schools, with mass shootings, and it's
Yeah. Yeah.
pretty much universally young men who are
Yeah.
doing these things. And
Yeah.
in many cases, in a lot of these mass shootings, it's like young white men, and it's sort of
Yeah.
like, so what's going on the internet? And we obviously know about, they talk about the 80-20 rule in this show, and how
Yeah.
these things that are sort of circulated in incel culture on the internet of 80% of women are only attracted to 20% of men, which means that 80% of men are left without a fighting chance in the
Y
dating pool. And that just
yeah.
and that these are these kind of stories that young men circulate on the internet that make them feel
Yep.
angry and disenfranchised.
Right.
And so Yeah, it's absolutely about fathers trying to figure out how the fathers that were not raised in the same technological era as
Yeah.
their kids were. So I was gonna ask you about that too, because
Yeah.
I feel like as millennials, we're like part of a hinge generation where
Yeah.
we got both. We
Yeah.
had we had analog technology, and we also remember our homes getting internet for the first time.
Yeah.
We
I
had
do.
dial-up internet with the very loud sound, and
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
we knew what it was like to wait several hours to watch a 2-minute long video clip, on
Yeah.
the internet, and we were part of the transfer into
Yep.
full, and so it's like a few years ago, I remember my sister asking me, like, what would you do you have any recommendations? I don't about
Mhm.
what to do with kids on the internet these days, and I was like, "Why are you asking me?" I'm like, "I'm not a parent," and what I say is it seems impossible. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know how you protect your kids from
Yeah.
the internet in the modern I just don't know if it's doable. But
Yeah.
I wonder, for you as a father, what
Right.
kind of experience you had with this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's something that is very scary. As
Yeah.
a parent, I have an 11-year-old boy, a 9-year-old boy, and then I have my 2 daughters who are 7 and 5. So my oldest son is very much, and he kinda looks and acts in some ways like Jamie.
Mm,
So for me, when I was watching this, my wife, first of all, we first started watching, she's like, "I hate this. I can't
yeah,
watch this." And I'm like,
yeah.
"I don't blame you." Like, I totally get it. Like, and it was really hard for me. I had to separate myself to kind of like just whenever I thought of my son, I was like, "No, I just got to keep thinking about the show."
Mhm.
But it's hard. Like as you said, we're a part of this hinge generation that has had both.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are very worried about the internet and about social media, and it is something to be very scared of. We have to be very, very cautious of this. Now, like I said, my son is 11, so I haven't had a ton of experience. He doesn't have a phone. He has a watch that he can communicate with his friends. We gave it, an Apple Watch that has cellular on it. And me and my wife are talking about if we're going to get him a phone or not right now. But I think the most important thing, I mean, this is kind of, the show itself is just talking about, like, just in general. I don't think it's taking a huge stance either way, or it's just kind of like presenting you with what's going on in this kid's life.
Mhm.
It's obviously saying that there are a lot of dangers, but I think it's also saying, like, sometimes you just can't prevent it, right? Like,
I think that's a big
yeah.
thing, especially in episode 4,
Yeah.
'cause the big thing in episode 4 that was just heartbreaking for me to
Oh,
watch
it
is
was
that
so
I
hard.
I I, uh, I cried a lot in episode 4 of this
Yeah.
show. I cried a
Yeah.
lot at the end of this show.
Yeah.
That the scene with the the mom and dad
Yep.
in their bedroom, and then him going into his son's bedroom just
Oh,
absolutely broke my heart.
me too.
But
Me
when
too.
they're talking about, like, how did we how
Yeah.
like, how did we make that?
Yeah.
I was reminded of there was this documentary, I can't remember what it was called, or maybe it was an episode of I think it was a documentary about, or no, it was a TED Talk. It was a TED Talk.
Oh, okay.
Dylan Klebold, who was one of the Columbine shooters, his mom did a TED Talk,
Oh, wow.
and she talked about what it's like to be the mother of this
Yeah.
person who and how she has to square in her mind and in her heart, you know, what her role in her son's life was,
Yeah.
and the fact that she still says, like, I love my son, and I feel guilty for loving my
Yeah.
son, and trying to explain what her experience has been like, and knowing that she's like, "There are people who think that I'm a bad person, and
Right.
I can't fault them for that because I'm responsible in many
Yeah.
ways for the upbringing of that kid," but also, I mean, the thing that the show wrestles with is they also have this daughter who's a great person, and, and I love the line where he goes, "How did we make her?"
Yeah. Yeah.
What his wife says, "The same way we made him."
Yeah.
And it's like, you can only do so much,
Yeah.
because the thing about having kids is, like, they are individual separate people
They
who
are.
are going to have the experience they're going to have, and there's only
Yeah.
so much you can do as a parent to
Yeah.
shape their
Well,
psychology or
yeah, and
yeah,
and it really is amazing. Like you can only do. I have so many thoughts. I'm sorry, but
sure.
the best thing that I feel like I can do for my son is to be there for him,
Hmm.
to have a good relationship with him where I can talk to him and that he feels free to talk to me. Now, there's going to be times that I have to discipline him and I have to try and correct him if he's done something wrong.
Hmm.
But I think the more important than monitoring his internet, uh, activity and his social media activity is involving him in my life and being there for him. I think that's the most important thing for me to do as a
Yeah.
father, to show him what it means to be a good father. So to be the example, but then to be there to talk to him.
Yeah.
And I think, you and I both had great father figures. We
Hmm.
were very lucky to have that, um, but in the end, it comes down to, I mean, you and I both made dumb decisions, we both
Sure.
did something like
I
you
still
cannot
do.
avoid it. Oh yeah, we all still do. And it is not my father or my mother who did that. It's me. That's my fault.
Yeah.
Those are the dumb things that I did.
Yeah.
Like you can, this is kind of a weird analogy, but I always think about this like sports, right?
Hmm.
Sports. Let's look at LeBron James. LeBron James is one of the best athletes, he's one of the best basketball players,
Sure.
all that. You look at, and for some reason, this happens with all athletes. We always think that their sons are going to be amazing athletes.
Right.
Like, oh, this kid's son is going to be amazing. Like, oh, let's get his son. He's going to be awesome. It's like, I finally had to tell myself, like, no, they're not. Just because their dad is an amazing athlete does not mean that they are going to be good. Now we're looking at LeBron James. His son is good enough to make it in the NBA. Many people don't think he is good enough to be in the NBA, but he has made it to the NBA,
Yeah.
right? And he is nowhere near good for him for making the NBA. That's better than the vast
Well,
majority
and
of people.
I
But
yeah,
he is
yeah.
not as good as his dad.
I was actually just thinking about this today about like how many players are in the NBA right now who are the sons of players we grew up watching. That there's
Yeah.
so many juniors. There's so many like Hardaway
Yeah. Yeah.
Jr. and
Yeah.
Gary
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Payton Jr. And
That's right.
obviously, Steph Curry is the son of Del Curry, who was a very famous player in his own right.
Yeah.
But Steph
Nowhere
Curry
near as
has
good.
Steph
Yeah.
Curry has far outpaced his father.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because it's like, yeah, like you could look at Bronny James and go, oh, did he just not work hard enough? Or is it, but it's like
Yeah.
like Bronny James, if we went and played a pickup game and Bronny James came and played, he would be we would be amazed
Oh,
how good at
yeah.
basketball he is.
Yeah.
He would,
Exactly.
he's like probably better at basketball than 95% of the people in the world.
Oh,
But the
yeah.
top 5% of people in the world all play in the NBA,
Yeah.
and he's in that group on
Yeah.
the lower side of it.
Right.
But yeah, it's like there is I I think that obviously it's not to say that parenting plays no role whatsoever in what
Right.
kind of
Right.
outcome is, but you can look at stuff like, people will often talk about like the Hanks, Tom Hanks's
Yeah.
sons, that
Yeah.
there's Colin and Chet, and Colin and Chet couldn't be
Yeah.
more different from each
Very
other.
different. Yeah.
And I know like a very famous meme is like this Colin Hanks and Chet Hanks are proof of like that names are important, because if you name one of your sons Colin, you're gonna get a Colin, and if you name one of your sons Chet, he's gonna be a Chet. And it's like, it's like it's like
Oh,
Chet is
nice.
so much more of a Chet than
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you
That's
know,
that's
yeah,
funny. Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show that like you are a product of your parents, but you are not everything that your parents are.
yeah,
You are a completely individual person, and we as a society like to group people. Well, if his father's like that, he's like that.
yeah,
If his brother's like that, he's like that. If
mhm,
his sister's like that, she's like that. Like it's just easy for us to do that. But when we look at that, like I'm very similar to my brothers, but I am a different person than all my brothers. And same with you. Like, and I
yeah.
am a different person than my father. And
Well, in in so many ways, you and I had such similar upbringings. I mean, like
Yes.
we always talk about on the show, we grew up right next door to each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
We grew up in the same church, in the same faith structure. We had a
Right.
lot of the exact same um, male role
Yeah.
models
Exactly.
and leaders in our community.
Yep.
And one thing that I never thought in a million years I would be is an addict. I never thought
Yeah.
in a million
Yeah.
years I'd be an alcoholic and a drug addict. And the fact that
Right.
like that happened in my adult life is so it was so beyond my like scope of what I thought was possible
Right.
for
Right.
the way that we were raised and where we were raised. And it's just like, oh, it you know, and I see this all the time in recovery too, that it's like
Yeah.
it's no respecter of economics.
Yes.
It affects people who were raised on the very low end of the socioeconomic spectrum, and it affects people who were raised in a very affluent and wealthy
Right.
circumstance too.
Right.
And it's sort of like it's more about the individual's experience. But I do think that this show is still trying to I don't know that the show is trying to preach or I don't think it has a
Yeah.
message of how to fix what's going on with young
Right.
men, but I
Right.
do think that the show seems concerned
Yes.
about what's going on with, you know, like how and
Yeah.
I think you are right that it comes back to this relationship fathers have with their sons and relationship
Yeah.
parents have with their sons of like is there something here that could have been done, or is it just something you have to just kinda go, "I don't know, boys are scary." Like
Yeah. I think yeah. I think the nice thing about this show
mhm,
is that they have a much more complex relationship because
yeah,
in a lesser show, I shouldn't say a lesser show, in some other shows, you have somebody who's a murderer and then you show the parents and they're horrible, and it's like,
right,
oh well, that's the reason, like
mhm,
that's there it is, like the dad was abusive, which that does happen.
mhm,
That's not saying that that's not real and that doesn't happen. That obviously happens. But this is taking, this is showing something that's so much more complex because the father, even though he has a temper and even though he probably wasn't a perfect father, like his son really, really loves him. And in the
mhm,
episodes that we see him, we see that he is genuinely trying to be a good father. Like he's genuinely trying to be a good person. So it's like I think it is saying it's very these things are very concerning. Social media use and internet use can be very concerning, but you can do everything the right way, and
right,
we still have our choices. No
right,
matter what, we have our agency. Like we
mhm,
can't blame anyone else but ourselves, and that's what ultimately. I don't know if it's not really screaming this in the show, but this was Jamie's choice. This
yeah,
was he's 13 years old. He can still make a choice.
yeah,
And he chose to kill this girl.
mhm,
Like he chose to let his anger get the best of him. And his parents did everything they could. And it obviously didn't work out because they're not there controlling him. Like that's his own choice.
I think that another good thing about episode 3 too, though,
Yeah.
it's important in episode 3 that this therapist character is a woman,
Yes.
because this is
Yes.
another big theme of this show, is it's not
Yes.
just about what's going on with young men or the relationship between young men and fathers.
Right.
That's obviously a big part of that's why we're even following the one detective and his son, is we're trying to
Mhm.
draw a parallel there. But we are also just talking about, like, what are young men learning about how to relate to women
Right.
and what what healthy relationships with women look like. I think about this all the time. Like, I as an adult have always had platonic friendships with women,
Right.
and I know that this is not necessarily the norm, like, because a lot of my friends, like you and a lot of guys that I grew up with, got married young,
Yeah.
and it's not normal for married young men to necessarily have, like, a lot of just female friends that they
Right.
go and hang out with regularly and go
Right.
get lunch with the girls, like,
Yeah.
but, like, I, as a 37-year-old man who's been, single a lot in my adult life, I have a very large group of friends that are women, and I always kind of did, though. Like, growing up, I had a lot of cousins my age who were girls,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I learned how to be friends with girls without there having to be something
Right.
attached to it, like some kind of chase. And again, like, this is just like circumstance. This is
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
this is just, oh, I was lucky to be able to learn how to be friends with women, and also doing theater and doing, like, stuff like that. Like, I
Right.
just learned how to have platonic relationships with women where there didn't need to be some kind of element of,
Yeah.
are we,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I see this a lot as an adult. I meet a lot of adult men who have never really had the experience of having strong platonic friendships with women. It's always been like, if there is a woman that I spend significant time with, it's probably because there's something romantic going on.
Mm.
And so I wonder what your feelings about that are, as a person who's been married your entire adult
Right.
life, like, about what this show has to say about how men are, and young men are being taught, or
Yeah.
conditioned, or learning to relate to women.
Yeah, and I think I think I also loved episode 3 because of that fact that you're talking
Mhm.
about as well. It had so much into it. Like
Yeah.
there was so much subtext with the female character that wasn't really even touched on, but you could see what's going on because she keeps going out and talking with that one security guard who's not doing anything inappropriate, but you could tell he has some sort of attraction with her that she just has to like deal with.
Mhm.
And she has to like, okay, I've got, I just thought it was amazing how she acted in that situation and how that all played out. But yeah, it's like it's hard because and I think this is where I have less less experience in some way because it is we grew up in a different time. But I think, it comes down to a lot of it is your relationship with your parents, your mother and your father, and the relationship that they had. How did your father treat your mother? How was your mother? So for me growing up, I grew up with 5 brothers. And everybody who everybody who whenever we tell that, like, oh my goodness, your poor mother, and it's always like it's like I always kind of feel bad because I'm like, listen, my mom was amazing.
Yeah.
Like my mom was such a great mom for boys because
And
she
you
was.
guys really didn't give her too much grief.
No, we
Yeah,
never did.
yeah,
Like we were,
no, yeah.
when you think of 6 boys, you think,
What
it'd
it
probably be
what it
worse.
could have
But
been,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly.
versus, yeah.
But my mom was great because she was a very strong woman. She was a great example of a woman for me and for my brothers. And so that was great. We had such a great example. And then my father treated my mother very, very well.
Mhm.
They still have a great relationship, which is a great example to me. So I think how you perceive women and how you perceive your relationships with women comes so much from your own experience but also what you're seeing. And I think there is a lot of negative portrayals online that can be very harmful.
Mhm.
I think a big thing for how you treat women is just being very self-aware of how you're treating women.
Right.
And I mean, take this with a grain of salt. I'm a white man. That's you know
Yeah.
what do I know? But I've been lucky enough to be able to work with a lot of women in a professional setting. And it's been very helpful for me because I mean, me and my wife have been married. It'll be 16 years this year. But and obviously you can get into inappropriate relationships if you're spending a lot of time with another woman.
Yeah.
And I think it's very dangerous if you're doing that. It can lead into
Sure.
very dangerous situations, obviously.
Mhm.
And not to say that you can't have platonic relationships.
You don't have to
Uh,
be like Mike Pence about it, where he's like, "I can't be alone with another woman who's
right,
my who's
right,
not my wife."
right, right, right. And I think in a professional setting, it's nice because, I mean, you have to be professional.
Sure.
And so, but women are not less than. And we are different. Men
Yeah.
and women are very different. We complement each other, and it's so. I mean, I say it weird. It's hard for me because I grew up in a time that didn't have this. We grew up in the 90s when we didn't have so much social media that has so many differing opinions. So it's interesting how they portray this in the show because he does seem to have a very very generic perception of who women are and how they
Yeah.
should be. And I think that was done really really well because it can be very dangerous when you think of women as things, or as less than.
It's you can see him struggling to sort of
Yes.
accept the personhood of this therapist. He's
Right.
he's so, like, skeptical of her. He's so, like, he has
Right.
such a hard time just kind of letting his guard down. He always thinks that she's trying to manipulate him in some
Yep.
way,
Yep.
or and then he accuses her several times of, like, "Oh, you got a boyfriend, do you?" Like, he just has such a hard time relating to her as another person. And I
Yeah.
also think that this is interesting too, that he picks his father in the first episode too,
Yeah.
because I think that there's something about this, like, even though I think he loves his mother, but I
Right.
think that this kid has a fundamentally really hard time knowing how to communicate with women.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that I'm glad that the show doesn't try to answer the question, but I like that the show is asking the question
Yeah. Yeah.
of, like, how do we I mean, I do a lot of, obviously, socio-political advocacy on my other channels and things like that.
Right.
I had this young, activist ask me back in the fall, I was at an event that I was working for. He said, "We're getting," this kid was like 22, and he's like, "Hey, so we're getting killed in my demographic. Like, he's like,
Mhm.
kids my age are just increasingly getting more and more down the pipeline of, like, of really misogynistic, harmful
Mhm.
stuff." He's like,
Yeah.
"Do you have any ideas of what to do?" And I was like, "Buddy, you're barking up the wrong tree. My audience is like 70% female." And
Oh, wow.
yeah, I'm like, I
Great.
don't like, there's not a lot of men that watch my stuff. And I know that there are, but the shows like Jake and Logan Paul and guys like this, when you look at their audience demographic, it's like 90% men. It's like,
Yeah.
if not
Yeah.
more. A lot of these shows in, like, the manosphere of podcasting and what boys seem to gravitate toward and think is cool. And again, it's like guys talking to guys, and
Mhm.
guys talking to guys about what their speculations on women and all of this stuff. And again, I don't have the answer, and I'm glad that this show doesn't try to have the answer,
Yeah.
but I'm
Yeah.
glad that the questions being asked of, like, w- uh, we've got a problem at the core of our society, and it didn't start with the
Mhm.
internet. It
Yeah.
didn't just start with social media. And the problem is, like, we how do we get, as you said, women are not less than, obviously. How do we get men to finally just get to a point where they can communicate better
Mhm.
with women without it having to be this, like, fraught thing that either has uh this overhang of fear of, like, "Ooh, I don't want to get into anything that looks inappropriate or romantic," or has this sort of derogatory element
Mhm.
where the woman makes you feel insecure because she has a power over you that like, and so you start being mean because you feel insecure. I think that a lot of these questions are brought up in this show, and I'm glad that they are,
Yeah.
because I see it as a problem that is kind of as old as civilization itself, that we are
Mhm.
continuing to grapple with, and
Yeah.
that we're definitely not solving in the
Yeah.
information era of the internet. Like, we continue to be sort of sequestered into our different pockets. Like,
Yeah.
the reason why his sister is the way that she is because she's having a completely different experience with society than he is,
Mhm.
and they have the same parents, and they
Yeah.
feel loved and accepted by their parents. But I don't know, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
I know, yeah, and it is good. This is what I like about this show too. Like you said, it just kind of raises the question. It's not trying to answer the question because there is no answer. There is no universal answer to
Right.
how do we fix this? If there was,
Mhm.
it would be a whole lot easier to fix it. But
Yeah.
everyone is their own person. Everyone is their own has their own individual choice and actions and what they can and can't do. And there's a lot of problems. It ultimately comes down to looking at yourself and seeing what you need to do better,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of people don't want to do that. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard for all of us in many, many different ways. We have to we have to be accountable, and we have to make changes in ourselves to fix problems that are out there in the world. And
Yeah.
it's really not to say that we can't fix a lot of people, but
Yeah.
there's no one size fits all for, the human race. So,
Right, because like I said, it's like in my personal experience is that I've never had a hard time relating to women or having like
yeah.
but I know that like I don't have that as like a thing that I hold over other men because I know that my experience was just different.
Yeah.
And then my
Yeah.
experience in adulthood has just been like, oh, it just sort of naturally happened that way, that
Yeah.
I just, through different, channels of circumstance, found myself in a
Yeah.
situation where a big portion of my platonic friends that are really close, a big portion of my closest friends
Yeah.
are women. And the people that I call on the phone and talk with, people that I go have lunch with, people that I go get coffee with are women. And
Mhm.
they're women who are in their own romantic partnerships. And we talk about like we have like girl talk and stuff. Like when I used to live in New York, I was in this big friend group, and all the girls in the friend group would often have like girls' night, and I was the only one that was invited to girls' night. And the guys in
Nice.
our friend group would be like, "Why is Austin invited to girls' night?" And they'd be like, "Because he doesn't try to hook up with us at girl." And I was like, and it's weird, like I was sort of treated as though I were like a gay guy in the friend group,
Right. Right.
but
Right.
which everyone knew I wasn't. But I've always
Yeah.
had that sort of ability to assimilate. And again, I don't look at that as like me being better than other
Right.
men. I view it as a matter of just like circumstance that this always sort of came a little bit more naturally to me for
Mhm.
whatever reason. And so it's not something that I can look at other men and go like, you should be like me because I fail in all of these other ways. I
Right.
like there's all these other ways in which like frankly, the thing that I've struggled with in my life is romantic relationships with women. That's
Mhm.
where I've struggled is I've had lots of different partners and lots of different
Mhm.
chapters that haven't worked out. And that's where I have a much easier time maintaining a friendship with a woman than I do maintaining a romantic relationship. And so again, it's just like it's a question that I don't have the answer to, but I
Yeah.
like when a show that is viewed by a lot of people and that is consumed in a big way, and maybe that's the answer for the oner thing is like the oner is the gimmick, it's the hook that gets people watching,
Yeah.
and then they can Trojan horse in
Yeah.
these important questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
Mhm.
I mean, ultimately, I feel like the one the the oner factor of this show works really, really well for the story that they're trying to tell.
Yeah,
This story could absolutely be told without oners, but
sure.
I like it because it focuses so much on the, emotion of it, and it can touch on all these really important topics of parenting and relationships and men and women and all that, but it doesn't have to hit you over the head with it because it has to be so focused in. And that was actually another thing that I kind of wanted to talk about is one of the reasons you want to do a oner is you want to limit yourself. Creativity, it thrives
I'm like
really, really
showing this like
well.
sponsored label every time I drink this. I'm like, oh, I should not do. We are not sponsored by BetterHelp.
No, if you want to though, we'll get
Mhm.
sponsored.
Yeah.
But the thing about oners and about creativity is like when you do a oner, you really have to figure out like it's a lot harder. It's a lot
Yeah.
harder on you. You have constraints, and
Right.
constraints are a very, very good thing for creativity because it makes you figure out the problems. Like, oh, if they could have just cut and done all this other stuff, we could have had a similar show, and maybe it would be just as good. But when you do a oner, you think, okay, well, how do we get from A to B? Like
Mhm.
physically, how do we get from A to B? Like it's a oner. How do we do that? So they're constraining themselves to make the show more creative,
Yeah.
like to just give you a different perspective and make you think about things in a different way,
Yep.
because when you cut back and forth again with warfare, it was awesome. It was real time.
Yeah.
That's great. It works really well. That comes with its own constraints, and this comes with its own constraints as well. And I think it's a great thing as a filmmaker, and it's a great thing as a creative person to give yourself constraints so that you don't have too many options. You can kind of go off the rails. Like it really focuses in on what story you're trying to tell. And I
Mhm.
really like this show because it is really focused on a very specific story for each episode.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a very well executed show. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about before we get into scores?
No, I don't think so. I think we can get
Okay,
it
cool.
scores.
Yeah, so we will do our scores now for Adolescence. You can stream this now on Netflix if you have a Netflix account. And let us know what you think. If this is your first time watching The Oner, which is our podcast, we do scores for technical rating. That's how well we feel like the movie or TV show we're talking about was technically executed at a craft level, cinematography, acting, music, all of that good stuff. Then we do a score for the ending. How well did this thing stick the landing? How good was the ending? We do a score for rewatchability. We do a score for cultural impact or relevance, and then we do a subjective score. So, Kramer, for Adolescence, what's your technical rating?
My technical rating is a 9. I think that this obviously is a huge technical achievement. I mean, it took a lot to get this thing made.
Mhm.
So that gives it high marks for me. But then on an acting level, like this had to have been extremely hard for the actors.
Yeah.
Like, and I think they all pulled it off. Like, I don't think there was really like a uh, anybody that stood out as a weak link in the acting. I think actually it showed there's a few people that just really, really stood out. Like, obviously the
Yeah.
father, Jamie, and then the she's not a social worker, but the woman in the third episode.
Mhm.
What was she? Was she a she's an
Therapist or
independent
some kind.
therapist?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Those three really stood out, and
Yeah.
they were just amazing. But everybody else was really great too. The son
It's
of the cop and the cop himself were also really great. So
Yeah, there's not a weak link in the cast. It's an
no,
incredibly well acted show. That's what really stood out to me when I watched it is
yeah,
the writing and the acting. I gave the show a 9 as well. Technically, I feel like they executed the technical demands of the oneer for each episode very, very well.
yes,
And if you've ever tried to do a oneer, I mean, I that's even like 5 minutes long, you
right,
know how hard it can be. Um, and
yep,
how many different things can go wrong to make you have to restart. And the fact that these were all true oneers is very technically impressive. The
mhm,
reason why I don't give it a 10 out of 10 is some of that stuff I mentioned earlier, where
right,
I just feel like there are sometimes little plot elements that are there to just keep me on the hook,
yeah,
to pull me through, that that don't necessarily go anywhere, that are just
yeah,
sort of dead ends that are meant to keep me intrigued, when really what I'm watching for is just to watch the emotional journey of these different
right,
characters. And I wonder if some of that stuff could have if it could have been stronger if we just kept it even more grounded.
yeah. I think even one thing that we didn't talk about that as you're talking, am reminded. The problem with oneers is it draws attention to itself.
Mhm.
You when you realize it hasn't cut, then you start, okay, when is it going to cut? Oh wow, this is crazy, this is still going on.
Mhm.
And like, that's a good thing, but it's also in some ways takes you out of the story a little bit. And
Yeah.
that is also kind of what this, like, sometimes I was like, oh, would that happen? Like, would this really happen in the sequence? Or like, okay, it's kind of drawing attention to itself a little bit, so it takes you just a little bit out of the story. More
Yeah.
of a nitpick, not a big deal, but that, yeah, I think you're totally right.
How do you feel about the ending of Adolescence?
The ending, oh god, it's kind of crazy because I mean, I guess the fourth episode is the ending.
Yeah.
I gave it an 8, and I just think like, oh man, should I give it higher? Because I think his name is Stephen Graham,
Mhm.
the actor. He just did such an amazing job. This is the guy that, like, um, you see him in a lot of movies, and then he gives a performance like this, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like that guy is really, really good. And I don't know.
Yeah, I had no idea that he had that in him, because I've
Yeah,
seen him in so many. He's kind of a character actor that shows
yeah,
up in
yeah,
different things, and I've never seen him really take center stage like
yeah,
this, and he really knocked this out of the park.
totally.
I've seen a lot of criticism for this last episode because it feels, I think for a lot of people, it feels unsatisfying to not go back to Jamie and not have some kind of, I think
Right.
what people are primed to expect is something that feels more procedural, that feels like
Yeah,
we
yeah,
finalize the case, and it feels a little emotionally unsatisfying to just have Jamie call his parents on the phone and say, "Hey, I'm going to plead guilty," and that be the end of his story. Eh, I get that. I get that
yeah. I can see
criticism.
that.
I gave this ending a 9 because I was watching this whole episode going, "Oh, what an interesting choice that they're choosing to end here." But I
Yes.
actually feel like at this point, we need to actually be here. And
Yeah.
I like that it comes full circle. I like that we end in his room, which is it's kind of where we began.
Yeah.
There's some really interesting technical Easter eggs. I don't know if you saw this on the internet. People talked about this that I thought
Right.
was really cool. In the first episode, when Jamie's getting arrested, he rips the wallpaper on his bedroom wall, and it kind of creates like a V shape that almost looks like a knife. And then in the last
Oh.
episode, his dad is on his bed hugging his pillow, and it looks like the knife's going into his back.
Oh, wow.
So there's some really interesting, again, technical execution stuff when you think about
Yeah.
if that was intentional, that
Yeah.
they wanted to create a picture, that's pretty amazing forethought and blocking to
Oh,
put
yeah.
into something like this.
Pretty
That's all.
amazing.
Yeah, and but also I think that, the people whose lives are going to the show is about the ripple effect of
Yeah.
what this kid has done to the
Yeah.
community, to his family. So I think we need to land on this family and see how they're going to
Yeah.
move forward, and try to find some semblance of normalcy. And I think that it's a really strong emotional place to land. It is heavy and it doesn't leave you
Oh,
feeling
yeah.
great, but I think this performance really kind of does what it
Yeah.
needs to do. I gave it a 9.
I think I gotta up my score. Like, just in talking to it, I don't know why I haven't given a 9, so give it a 9 as well.
Yeah, and then rewatchability.
Rewatchability. This is a little bit lower for me. I gave it a 6 because it's a really, really heavy show. Really hard to really hard to watch. Extremely good performances. I definitely could watch it again. But it's heavy, so I just gave it a 6.
You and I are in the exact same spot. I was at a
Yeah.
6 just for the exact same reason where I was like, excellent show. I would recommend it to someone who's never seen it, especially if someone was dealing with something, maybe with like a kid who goes through something like this. But I don't know that it's a kind of thing that I'm going to want to return to. Maybe,
Yeah. Yeah.
as an example, if I'm making something in the future that is a oneer that wants to accomplish a maneuver that they do in this show, I could use it as an example.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Of something that where it's worked, but I don't know that I would want to go through the journey of it again.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think there could be interesting things to look at just from a
Yeah.
technical
Oh,
standpoint.
yeah. Totally.
Cultural impact and significance.
Yeah, I gave it a 7. I think it's hit a lot of people are talking about this. It is a limited series, so I kind of hope they don't do anything else. Just for the sake of the story. I mean, they could, but
They probably won't.
they
Usually
probably won't.
they're pretty good about beginning,
Yeah.
middle, and end and calling it quits.
Yeah, which I think is good. I think
Yeah.
this is where the story should end. So I think the problem with it though, as far as the cultural impact, is that this will always be associated with a oner, and
Yeah.
should they have done it that way. But I still think it's having an impact, and I think it will continue to have an impact.
It's certainly one of the most talked about TV shows so far of this year.
Hmm.
And I'm right with you. I'm at 7 because I don't know if it will continue to have, ramifications in years to come, but it's definitely going to be something that continues to prove the formula that like
Right.
I like anything that continues to prove the formula that like you don't need to cut so much. The
Yeah.
people
Yeah. Yeah.
people it actually keeps the audience on the wire when you don't. And and so I like kind of seeing people
Yeah.
get more and more ambitious with this.
Totally.
And then subjective score.
My subjective score is an 8. I think technically it's amazing. The acting, the fact that they were able to make oners is great. I think some of the things that we talked about, it kind of takes you out of the story a little bit. Some of the things are, as we had said. I think this was a great show, though. I mean, I think 8 is
Yeah.
it's a really, really well made show that has a really good message, that is executed very well.
Yep. I put it at 8.5. I really
Nice.
enjoyed the show. I just like watching good acting,
Yeah.
and this is a feast of good acting. And I enjoyed the technical execution of what they had to do. And I thought that it wasn't like distracting in a bad way. And I didn't find it to be something that felt just like a gimmick for the sake
Yeah.
of a gimmick. I felt
Yeah.
like it worked. I'm sort of a believer that like oneers could be used way more often in everything. And I kind of believe like if there's not a reason for us to cut, why are we cutting?
Yeah.
If you're not
Yeah.
trying to say something with the cut, if you're not trying to do something with the camera and say something visually, then why are you cutting? If the scene
Yeah.
is not over and and we're not doing a time jump or something like that. I'm a big believer, and I think stuff like this shows that, like, yeah, and stuff like the studio, which I'm enjoying right now. The studio, it's not just that one episode. Every episode has big long
Yeah,
sequences
yeah,
that are
yeah,
3, 4, 5 minutes long, where the
yeah.
camera doesn't cut, and I love that stuff. So I
Nice.
really
Yeah,
enjoyed this show. I don't, you know,
yeah, yeah,
know if I'll be visiting again anytime soon, but
yeah.
8.5 from me. And
Good.
what did you think out there in the audience? Did you enjoy the show? Did you find it to be too gimmicky? Did you find it to be manipulative? What do you think about the conversation here? Let us know. And if you want to follow along next week, we got to do it. We're going to be watching Thunderbolts.
It's gonna be a good
So
one.
they got a new Marvel.
They do. It's gonna
There's
be crazy.
I heard there's a new Marvel. You know that line and
Yeah,
that
that's what I was referencing. Yeah. What is it,
there's a new
friendship?
Marvel
Yeah,
out. It's gonna be
yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
We should go
So
see that. Yeah.
yeah. So we're gonna go see the new Marvel
Yep.
Thunderbolts, and we'll be
Should be
talking
fun.
about it next week. Go see it if you want to follow
Yeah.
along.
Yeah. I gotta say though, why you wearing a Mickey Mouse shirt?
Okay. This was my thought is Adolescence.
That's kind of what I
Okay.
thought. Yeah.
Adolescence.
Okay.
Like I
So
could have worn this for Andor,
yeah,
but
yeah, you could have
I
Mouse
didn't.
House. Yeah.
But this
Uh,
is, I think this is like, this is innocence and
yeah, yeah,
adolescence,
yeah. That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
you heard my Mickey Mouse impression?
No.
Okay. Oh boy, what
That's
a great shirt!
that, that's actually really good.
Oh, thank you.
This is
Yeah.
reminding me of the episode where we did our Joker laughs and you blew mine out of the water. And you did like the best. You did such a good Joker laugh. So that's
Oh,
crazy.
thank you. Yes, Mickey
Um,
Mouse is one that I can do very well.
why
So
don't you get into voice acting?
I could. This is the thing about voice acting. It is acting.
Yeah.
I don't know how my acting skills are.
Well,
It is hard, but hey, anybody listens to that wants me to be the next Mickey Mouse, I'll do it. But
that was pretty darn good. I gotta say.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All
Yeah,
right.
we went to Disneyland and I was in the ride for the Mickey Mouse and I did it. And someone's like, wow, that was really good. So thank you, person. Anyway,
Yeah.
all right,
Very
end
good.
it on that one.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Have a good one. Bye bye.